Dear Tattooed Biker, no, I'm not sure what it was that I saw, but I never forgot it. Do you or your viewers have any thoughts? You see, I grew up in the suburbs north of Atlanta. It was 70 years ago, and naturally woody and beautiful. This happened some 65 years ago. I was just wandering around indoors, playing, and I saw my mother lying on a chaise in the living room. Behind her were these gorgeous, huge windows. Three of those big windows that you could open up and step outside. I walked towards my mother, and that's when a huge, and I mean bigger than any person that I've ever seen, black dog was suddenly at the glass. The only problem was it was standing up on its hind legs and had its front legs and paws curled up like you do to imitate monster claws or hands. I froze, but then it jumped at the windows like it was going to try and claw its way through. I was totally terrified, screaming, and then I ran. I ran everywhere I could, even in circles. I don't think that I've ever been that scared in my short life. Of course, my mom woke up, and even though I tried to tell her about what it was, I couldn't make her understand what I saw. We even called my dad to come home, and I tried to tell him. They just didn't or couldn't understand. It was huge and looking right at me the whole time. It wasn't just a dog, but that's what everyone was saying. They kept telling me that it was my neighbor's dog because they had a black German shepherd. But I tell you, Biker, this thing, whatever it was, it didn't look anything like the neighbor's dog. Not at all. And besides, that dog was friendly and never ever came out of its yard. Never, not in all the years that we lived there, did I ever see that dog anywhere besides its own yard. And now, to this day, at 70 years old, I still have nightlights throughout the house. After that happened, I never went to sleep without having the bedroom lamp on. And I don't mean a nightlight, I mean an actual bedroom lamp. For years, I couldn't stay in my bed. I would wake up and ask my brother if I could sleep with him, or ask my parents if I could sleep in their room. Sometimes I even slept on a couch out in the Spanish room. My dad was half Spanish. It wasn't dark when it appeared, when I saw that big black thing, but I always associated dark with it. I never saw it again, and I pray I never do. To this day, I don't know what else it could have been. It had to have been a dog thing or something. And no, I don't like to say the actual word. I guess I'm even scared to type it. Thanks. Signed, Chet. Dear Biker, this is crazy, but I have a story from my mother and grandmother that I've been told since I was young. My mom, who was a devout Christian, and if you knew her, you would know that she never lies. To the point that it annoys you even. Not even little white lies. She's incredibly sweet, but she won't lie to even keep the peace. You ask her if she likes your outfit, and she'll straight up tell you that she does not. But often in a polite way. Well, she doesn't like telling this story. But my grandmother had told me that when I was about 6 years old, my grandparents had a farm. And behind this farm had a wooded area with a creek, and I'd play by the creek. They only had one rule: don't ever go past that creek. Stay on our side. Well, I was playing out there one day, and it was sunlight out. And that's when I heard a howling coming from the trees. I looked up there and I saw a wolf-like being up there in the branches, and obviously freaked the heck out. I told my grandmother about it, and she relayed a story from my mother's childhood, where she had seen the same thing while a teen picking flowers on the other side of the creek. She had heard the howling, looked up, saw it, and then ran back across the creek. When my mom jumped the creek, it didn't follow her any longer, and she stood in a crouched position. My mom was crying for her grandmother, and her mom came out and she saw the wolf thing standing there, just staring at them. They both described it as a large, dog, monkey-looking thing. The glowing red eyes, and it completely matched what I'd seen. It messed with me so bad that I had nightmares about this thing for years. I just found your channel recently, but if I can find it, I even wrote a book in first grade about the event, and it really disturbed my teacher. I'll see if I can find it, and if I do, I'll send it to you. Anyways, it's always wild to hear others have had similar experiences. Thank you for all you do. Signed, Teresa. Hey TB, back in the spring of 2016, a few of my friends and I were talking about their experience with some weird creature in the desert southeast of Tucson near Vail, Arizona. The descriptions actually sounded a lot like Mothman, though this creature had no wings. I was skeptical, but I didn't want to doubt my friends because whatever this was had really scared them. They said that they believed that it was some kind of alien or something. Well, later on that same year in the winter, these sightings were far from my mind. I happened to be visiting a friend who lived in Vail, and I stayed overnight that evening. At around 2 a.m., I left their house to drive about 25 minutes down I-10 toward home. I was going about 50 miles per hour when, approaching a rise in the road, I see a silhouette. Now, before I even processed what I was observing, I soon realized that I had slowed and eventually stopped on the shoulder to get a better view. Now, this thing, it was about 20 yards away or so, standing almost in the middle of the road. Because of the rise in the road, well, I could only see this form from the hips up. It was very tall and looked human-like. Very, very skinny, with long, thin arms and skin that was dark and leathery looking. Though there was no sheen to the body, it looked very dry. The eyes were a reflective red color, and I couldn't tell if it was looking at me or not, but there wasn't another car in sight at the time. Now you see, I'm usually really calm during emergency situations, and I'm very interested in unexplained phenomena, but confronting this thing, the panic switch just flipped. My mind started telling me to hit the gas, but I just sat there, staring at this being. I looked down for a split second, considering turning around and driving back to my friend's house. I put the car in first gear, and when I looked back up, the thing was gone. I immediately drove towards my house. I was shivering uncontrollably the whole way home. When I finally pulled into the driveway and walked in my kitchen door, I became violently ill, and I literally passed out right there in my bathroom. Now, I didn't wake up till about 1 p.m. that day, and I dragged myself off the bathroom floor and immediately went to bed. I was completely exhausted and just wanted to sleep, and I rarely left that bedroom for the next 5 days. I had no appetite, and it seemed like every bone in my body was aching. One of my friends eventually came over and helped me into the living room. I managed to eat a little bit, but I was still very tired and despondent. I didn't tell her or anyone else what I'd encountered. I just told them that I had the flu. Do you have any idea what I observed out there in that desert? Have you ever heard of any similar creatures? Signed, Mike. Now, on a distance ride that I took a few years ago, down through the Appalachians and along the parkway, a storm blew up, and I took shelter in this little diner. I sat there at the bar having a coffee, and there I struck up a conversation with a local. He seemed to be a good guy and obviously proud of his locale, telling me all the spots that I should visit. Then, as always, I asked him if he had ever seen or experienced anything out of the ordinary. Then, as his expression changed, I explained that I research and tell the stories of the unexplained. And he confided in me that, yeah, he had something happen to him, but if I ever shared his story, if I could keep his name out of it. So what follows is what he told me, and in keeping my promise, I'll just refer to him in what follows as the witness. During the early afternoon of June 18th, 1997, near Johnson City, Tennessee, the witness and his cousin were out hunting and were sitting on the side of a wall of a rather large hollow which consisted of a very thick underbrush and lots of evergreen. A larger valley then leads first to a clearing and then on to a supposed old Indian graveyard. All of a sudden, they hear the brush in the hollow below rattling, and they could tell that whatever was making the noise was really large. Now, the main witness was armed with a Ruger 10-22 rifle with plenty of ammo and ready to go. Under his night vision scope, he could see what appeared to be a man, but upon further inspection, he realized that this man was a creature 7 to 8 feet tall and approximately around 450 pounds. It was covered in thick black fur and was slimmer than what you hear of the popular Bigfoot image, almost skinny with a neck. Also protruding on either side of its head appeared to be tapered horns, also black in color. On the top of the head also protruded a horn pointing straight up. All these horns, he said, were 5 to 6 inches in length and were the same dark color as the creature. The terrified witness emptied a 25-round magazine into the creature and then retreated into a nearby cabin about 65 feet away. The next morning, they couldn't find anything except for spent shell casings and bullet holes on a walnut tree. He had thought that they had struck the creature several times. Nearby, animal traps had been sprung, and all the bait had been extracted. And on a nearby ridge, the witnesses located a series of tunnels made up of brush and various sizes of tree limbs, vines, and leaves. They thought that this could have been the lair of the beast. Terrified, they quickly returned home and never returned to that area again. Dear Tattooed Biker, I've had many odd experiences over the years, lots of which come from my time camping as I work towards being an Eagle Scout. I've spent extensive amounts of time in national parks and in the bush solo. Now, these are places where, well, I generally feel pretty comfortable in. But some of my experiences creep me out so much that, to this day, it deters me from solo ventures. I'm still an avid outdoorsman, but I'm also very cautious. Now, this particular event happened around 2007 in the Gila Wilderness, Gila National Forest in New Mexico. I'm from New Mexico, and I was raised in Roswell, so this is an area where I've visited several times prior without any kind of incident. But on this particular trip, I was with a group of about 10 other people. We were 2 days into our trek with several more to go. Now, those who aren't familiar with Gila, it's a stunningly beautiful area with trails that follow a winding river that carves beautifully through a canyon. High cliff sides are jutting up hundreds of feet through some parts of the canyon and dense brush overall. It's very isolated and has an odd vibe to it in certain places. I've always associated that with the fact that it's an area with ancient Native American history, dating back to at least 9600 BC that I know of, maybe even further. Lots of crazy stuff has happened here over the years, to be sure. It has a compelling history. Now, on this particular night, we were camped in an area where the river makes a U-shape as it wraps through the canyon. It had been a fun day, and I had even managed to catch some trout that I ate for dinner. Right around dusk, I needed to relieve myself. So I wandered away from our camp into what I would describe as a ravine, where the floodwaters drain into the river. There was dense brush and high-sloping banks on either side. All in all, it seemed like a good place to go to the John at the time. I made my way up the ravine, and looking back on it, I walked an unreasonable distance away from the camp, which, to this day, I find strange. I kept walking, almost absent-mindedly, or being drawn further in, which just isn't my norm. To preface, there's something I think many here are familiar with that's known as the silence. Typically, this phenomenon occurs in nature when there's a large predator in the area. And I know from hearing other stories here, some of you are familiar with it. Anyways, about halfway through, I noticed how eerily quiet it was, and I knew that something was very wrong. Now, when I say quiet, I mean the silence was absolutely deafening, if that makes any sense. By this time, it's almost completely dark, and I'm out of earshot of my camp. Alarm bells instantly start blaring in my head and gut. My hair stands on end, and I notice a strange change in my perception. But the light around me seemed to become kind of shrouded in shadow all of a sudden. It was almost like someone had one of those dimming switches for a light bulb. You know that feeling you get when you're just sitting somewhere public and you can feel somebody looking at you? Well, that's what happened suddenly, and very intensely. A few moments later, I hear a loud and distinct crack, and an odd rustling from about 30 feet away from me, above, somewhere in the bush. It sounded like a person walking where no person should be. It sounded almost like human footsteps, cracking along the twigs. I was petrified, scared to make a move, but I finished my business and stood as confidently as I could muster, facing the direction of this sound. I was unarmed, and knowing what I knew about predators, I didn't want to make myself appear any more vulnerable than a kid alone in a ditch. In the dark already did. I've had encounters with bears, mountain lions, and more, but this felt so much different. I didn't have the high ground, figuratively or literally. So I called out loudly, "Hello?" A few seconds passed by, and the rustling continued in the distance, and then suddenly more silence. With no response back after a few minutes, at this point I felt beyond vulnerable, very terrified, unreasonably terrified even. In hindsight, and after researching, I wonder if infrasound played a role. With my hair standing on end, I took a few steps back, and that's when I noticed the eyes. About 20 feet away from the bank of the ditch, there was a pair staring directly at me. I was in complete shock for a moment, as it was near where I heard the crack. Slightly iridescent-looking eyes, high above me, up on the bank. High enough that they had to either be on a massive creature or a large creature in a tree branch. The silhouette just didn't make sense, but the shadows played tricks on the eyes and the mind. I can't be sure that it wasn't a large owl or something, but the circumstances and general feeling make me think otherwise. The silence and the heaviness in the air were all wrong, but it's still very hard to explain. Instinctively, I backed up as slowly as I could, facing those eyes, and that's when I heard another crack above me and to my right. This one made me lose my shit, as that noise was much closer. At that point, my fight or flight kicked in, and I turned and sprinted as fast as I could. Breathless, I made it back to camp, and I told my friends that I thought there was a large predator in the area, and that we should make sure that we bag and take precautions. Thinking back on it, I think it very well could have been a mountain lion or a bear. Who really knows? One thing that I know for certain is that it felt like I was in absolute danger, and all of my alarm bells were screaming at me to get out of there. The whole experience still freaks me out all these years later, and the shade of that memory is always in the back of my mind whenever I'm out in the woods. All in all, I'm glad I just didn't end up another backwoods missing person statistic. Thanks, Biker, for letting me share. Signed, Bradley. And there it is. All the true reports of strange encounters and sightings that I have for you tonight. So what'd you think about these? As always, I'm anxious to read your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, but please, keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have an unexplained encounter that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description and, well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks so much for taking this weird ride with me tonight. I really appreciate you. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and well, I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.